The U.S. Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against New York City targeting its sanctuary city policies. Federal officials claim the city is obstructing immigration enforcement, while local leaders argue they're protecting civil rights and community safety. Watch the full video to hear both sides, what's at stake legally, and how this could affect other sanctuary cities across America.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on, well, a unique deep dive. We're focusing intensely on just one single, incredibly potent headline, really, just a mere sentence.
Right.
Our mission isn't to skim the surface, but to, excavate what it truly means, to identify every key player and understand why every single word in that concise statement carries immense weight.
Mm-hmm.
We aim to extract a truly significant understanding, a well-informed grasp of a complex situation, even from what looks like minimal information.
And what's truly fascinating here is just how much profound meaning and, frankly, actionable insight can be discovered when we commit to thoroughly dissecting even the most concise piece of news. The goal isn't to get overwhelmed by a flood of information, which often leaves us feeling, superficially informed.
Right, you just see headlines fly by.
Exactly. Instead, we want to gain deep, nuanced knowledge. By laser focusing on the core elements presented, we're going to demonstrate exactly how much clarity and strategic understanding can be gleaned from such a focused analytical approach. It lets you quickly become well-informed on what might seem like a simple news item.
Absolutely. And the central piece of information, the entire foundation of this deep dive, our singular anchor, is this direct quote from a source. Justice Department sues New York City over sanctuary city policies.
That's it?
That's it. One sentence. The entirety of the factual information we're technically working with. It presents a fascinating challenge, but also, I think, an incredible opportunity to see just how many layers of deeper meaning we can peel back.
Definitely.
So, to kick us off, for someone just seeing this headline, what's the immediate, most fundamental significance of that statement? What jumps out first?
Well, the very first word that really demands our attention and truly sets the tone for this entire situation is the verb sues.
Okay, sues.
Yeah. This isn't merely, say, a strongly worded administrative complaint or a political disagreement aired in a press conference or even just a policy debate playing out in Congress or something.
Not just talk.
Not just talk. The word sues fundamentally signifies a formal legal action. It means it has been initiated in a court of law.
Right. The courts are involved now.
Precisely. It means one party, in this case the Justice Department there, the plaintiff, is bringing a complaint, or what's called a cause of action, against another party, New York City. They're the defendant before a judge or jury.
Okay.
And the expectation is that this court will render a legally binding decision. It's crucial to understand, too, that a lawsuit is a specific type of civil action distinct from criminal proceedings.
Good point. So they're not accusing the city of a crime per se.
Correct. The federal government isn't prosecuting a crime here. It's seeking a judicial remedy for what it sees as a legal wrong or a conflict with federal law.
So it's not just a stern warning or a strongly worded letter, like you said. It's a full-on invocation of the judicial system. What exactly does that imply about the nature of the dispute itself? Why does it escalate to this level?
Well, precisely. The weight of a lawsuit, particularly one initiated by the federal government, is considerable. It inherently implies that other, less formal ways of resolving this.
Like what? Negotiations?
Yeah, exactly. Perhaps intergovernmental negotiations, maybe administrative directives, or even political appeals. It implies those have either been tried and failed, or maybe they were just deemed insufficient to address the perceived gravity of the conflict.
So talks broke down, essentially, or weren't enough.
Or weren't seen as enough, yeah.
Yeah.
When a lawsuit is filed, the dispute is formally escalated into the judicial system. And that's where legal precedent, statutory law, the Constitution, and the interpretive power of the courts are brought to bear.
It moves out of the political back and forth.
It moves the discussion beyond political rhetoric or policy negotiation and squarely into the realm of legal enforcement. The Justice Department, by filing this suit, is basically invoking the force of law to compel a specific outcome, or maybe declare certain actions illegal, or establish a particular legal interpretation.
Okay.
So for you, the listener, understanding that this is a sue immediately flags this as a serious matter. It's transitioned from mere political discourse into a formal legal challenge. It suggests a perceived fundamental illegality or an irreconcilable conflict, rather than just, a difference of opinion that could be worked out through compromise.
That's a critical distinction. So when the Justice Department sues in a case like this, what kind of outcome are they typically looking for? Are they trying to get money, or is it something else entirely?
That's an excellent question, and it highlights the different types of remedies available through legal action. In a case like this, where the federal government is challenging a city's policies, well, it's highly unlikely they're seeking monetary damages.
Right, that seems unlikely.
Instead, they'd typically be pursuing what are known as equitable remedies.
Equitable remedies. What does that mean?
It could involve seeking, say, a declaratory judgment. That's where the court issues a formal declaration stating that New York City's sanctuary policies are unlawful or perhaps unconstitutional.
So just getting the court to say, this is illegal.
Basically, yes. Or, and often alongside that, they might seek an injunction.
An injunction, I've heard that term.
Yeah, it's a court order compelling New York City to either stop implementing certain policies,
To stop doing something.
or to take specific actions to comply with federal law. An injunction can be quite powerful because if you don't comply, well, that can lead to findings of contempt of court, which has its own consequences.
Serious stuff.
Very. So the goal here isn't about financial compensation. It's really about legally compelling a change in the city's behavior or invalidating its policies. And, importantly, setting a legal precedent that could affect other cities too.
Okay, that makes sense. So having dissected the fundamental nature of the sue, that formal legal action, it naturally leads us to the critical question. Who are the players actually involved in this high-stakes legal drama?
Right.
Our single sentence names the first party, the Justice Department. Now, for listeners who might know the name but not the full scope, who exactly is the Justice Department, and what does their involvement tell us about the nature and scale of this legal action?
Okay, the Justice Department. More formally, the United States Department of Justice, or DOJ. It's a truly colossal and multifaceted entity within the federal government.
Colossal is a good word.
It really is. It serves as the federal executive department responsible for enforcing the law and administering justice across the entire United States. Think of it as the nation's chief law enforcement arm.
The top cops, essentially, at the federal level.
In a way, yes, but much broader. It has this sprawling mandate to uphold the rule of law, ensure public safety, protect civil rights. It's headed by the Attorney General, who's one of those powerful legal figures in the country, appointed by the president.
Okay.
And within the DOJ, you have all these different divisions, like the Civil Division, which typically handles litigation involving the federal government itself, or the Office of Legal Counsel, which advises the president and other executive agencies on legal matters. It's huge.
So when we hear the federal government's involved, this isn't just some minor agency or a bureaucratic office tucked away somewhere. This is the ultimate legal muscle of the United States.
Absolutely.
And its involvement immediately signals a specific kind of conflict, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The Justice Department represents the U.S. government in legal matters, both as a prosecutor for federal crimes and as a party, a litigant, in several cases like this one. So when it initiates a lawsuit against a major city, well, it's not just any organization suing. It is literally the legal voice and the enforcement arm of the entire federal system stepping in.
Wow.
The significance of the federal government, specifically its chief law enforcement entity, taking this step against a city, you really can't overstate it. It indicates that the policies in question are perceived to be in direct fundamental conflict with federal law or federal policy.
That's serious conflict.
And that this conflict is deemed serious enough to warrant intervention at the highest legal level of the U.S. government. Essentially, they are asserting federal authority over what might otherwise be considered local governance.
And is this as much about setting a national precedent or sending a broader message as it is about this specific conflict with New York City? Is there a bigger picture strategy here?
That's a really perceptive question, and yes, it often is. The Justice Department's involvement signals that this isn't viewed as just a localized or isolated dispute that can be resolved solely within, say, New York State or city jurisdiction.
It goes beyond NYC.
It immediately elevates the conflict to a national scale. It becomes a matter of federalism, that balance of power between the federal government and state or local governments. For you, the listener, it's crucial to consider the immense scale of power involved here.
Yeah.
When a branch of the federal government takes legal action against a city, this is the ultimate legal authority of the U.S. weighing in. It suggests the issue at hand is seen as impacting federal statutes, maybe federal sovereignty, or perhaps the uniform application of federal law across the whole nation.
Uniform application, that sounds key.
It often is.
Yeah.
And a key legal concept that might be at play here is something called federal preemption.
Preemption.
Yeah, it's the idea that federal law can override or preempt state or local laws in certain areas. This happens particularly when Congress intends for federal law to be the only law in a field, they call it occupying the field, or when a state or local law directly conflicts with federal law.
So the DOJ is basically saying our federal law trumps your city policy here.
That's likely the core of their argument, yes. The DOJ's action implies they believe federal law preempts or takes precedence over New York City's sanctuary policies. This transforms what might seem like a localized issue into one of national legal and governmental significance.
Okay, so we have the immense power of the Justice Department as the plaintiff now clear. Let's shift focus to the other side of the legal equation, New York City, the defendant. So what does it mean that New York City is the one being sued by the Justice Department? Is there a particular significance to this specific defendant?
Oh, absolutely. New York City is far more than just another municipality on the map. It's arguably the largest and certainly one of the most influential cities in the United States.
That's a big target.
A huge target and a huge influencer. It's a global hub for finance, culture, media, international relations, its sheer size, its incredibly diverse population, its profound economic and cultural prominence, all mean that its policies often have a ripple effect.
What happens in NYC doesn't stay in NYC.
Not at all. Policies adopted there can influence other cities across the nation, sometimes even shaping national discourse. It stands as a highly visible symbol of urban governance, particularly in its approach to social issues and, relevant here, immigration policies. Other cities definitely watch what New York does.
So it's not just a high-profile target, but one with considerable influence on other jurisdictions. This decision to target NYC must be a deliberate strategic choice by the Justice Department, then.
Exactly. I think that's fair to assume. The choice of a major high-profile city like New York as the target for a federal lawsuit suggests that the policies in question aren't seen as just some obscure or minor local ordinances.
They're significant.
Right. On the contrary, they're likely significant, probably well-established, and potentially influential on a broader scale. If the Justice Department were to sue a much smaller, less-known town, it might be perceived as an isolated incident, maybe just a test case or something. But by targeting New York City, it signals that the federal government likely views these policies as emblematic, perhaps widespread, or particularly egregious in how they conflict with federal law, in the DOJ's view. There's almost certainly a strong strategic element at play, aiming to send a very clear message.
And this choice, by default, raises the visibility of the entire situation, doesn't it? It ensures this won't be some quiet legal battle, but a very public one.
It absolutely does. The identity of the defendant in a lawsuit is critically important because it often dictates the level of public and political visibility the dispute will get.
Makes sense.
When New York City is involved, it automatically draws considerable attention from national media, political commentators, various advocacy groups on all sides of the issue. This isn't going to be a quiet legal battle that plays out unnoticed in some district court.
No chance of that.
No. It's one that will be scrutinized, debated, and has the potential to become a real focal point for national policy discussions around federalism, immigration, local autonomy, law enforcement cooperation.
All those big themes.
All those big themes. So for you, the listener, understanding that New York City is the defendant immediately tells you that this isn't just a legal battle. It's also a significant public and political showdown that will likely have ramifications far beyond just the courtroom itself. It implies the federal government is making a deliberate statement by targeting such a prominent entity, possibly seeking to establish a nationwide precedent, or maybe just to compel other similar jurisdictions to rethink their own policies.
Okay, so we've identified the who, the Justice Department, New York City, and the how, the act of suing. Now, let's zero in on the what of this conflict. Sanctuary city policies. What does that phrase inherently suggest, purely from the words themselves, if we try to bracket out any external political context we might already have from news cycles or debates?
Okay, yeah, just looking at the words. What's truly fascinating here is the term sanctuary itself. Yeah. It immediately conjures images of a place of refuge, right? A safe haven, a protective enclosure. Historically, sanctuaries were places, often churches or temples, where people could seek safety from persecution, arrest, or legal action.
Like finding refuge.
Exactly. So when you combine sanctuary with city, it suggests a municipal area, a defined geographical and governmental entity, that through its policies,
Policies being key.
yes, through its formal rules and guidelines, provides a specific degree of refuge or protection to certain individuals. It implies a deliberate decision by the city to create a distinct environment.
So it's a city that has decided to formally act as a haven, essentially carving out its own space within a larger legal framework. What exactly does sanctuary mean in this specific context, just based on the sentence?
Well, when we consider the context that the Justice Department, the federal law enforcement arm, is the one doing the suing of this sanctuary city.
Okay, putting those pieces together.
The implication within the sentence becomes clearer. The refuge or protection being provided is likely from some external entity that the Justice Department represents or enforces laws for.
And given the DOJ's role?
Given the Justice Department's major role in enforcing federal laws, especially immigration laws, the most immediate and logical inference, purely from the context of these specific words in this sentence, is that the city is providing a degree of non-cooperation or protection from federal immigration authorities.
Ah, okay. That makes sense from the words alone.
It signals a divergence in approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
The city seems to be prioritizing providing refuge, maybe limiting its cooperation, while the federal government prioritizes uniform enforcement of its immigration laws.
It sets up that conflict.
It really does. And it's important to note, even just thinking about the term, that sanctuary city policies aren't monolithic. It's not one single thing.
It's a spectrum.
It exists on a spectrum, yeah.
Yeah.
Policies can range from something relatively passive, like simply instructing local police not to inquire about an individual's immigration status during routine encounters,
Okay.
to more active non-cooperation, like refusing to honor detainer requests from ICE Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
What are those detainers exactly?
They're requests from ICE for local jails or police to hold individuals for an extra period, usually up to 48 hours beyond when they would normally be released.
Even if their local charges are resolved?
Yes, precisely. To give ICE time to come and take them into federal custody for immigration proceedings. Refusing those detainers is a common feature of sanctuary policies.
I see. So the lawsuit probably targets specific aspects of NYC's policies.
Almost certainly. The DOJ likely believes specific policies directly impede federal immigration enforcement in ways they argue are unlawful.
And the term policies is absolutely key here, isn't it? You mentioned it earlier. It implies a deliberate, formalized approach, not just, random acts by city employees.
Absolutely. The word policies is crucial. It indicates these are not informal individual practices by, say, a police officer on the street or a clerk in an office.
It's official.
It's official. Instead, they're adopted, formal stances, rules, or guidelines enacted by the city government itself. This could be through laws passed by the city council or maybe executive orders from the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
This signifies a deliberate official decision on the part of New York City to enact and enforce these specific measures. So this term, policies, even without any external knowledge of specific political debates, immediately signals a potential divergence in approach or priorities between the local level, New York City, and the federal level, the Justice Department.
A clash of official stances.
Yes, regarding how certain populations should be treated or how enforcement responsibilities should be handled. This clash isn't accidental. It's rooted in formal, differing approaches to governance and, critically, the interpretation of jurisdictional boundaries.
Jurisdictional boundaries. That sounds like where the legal fight really happens.
It often is. And this is also where the city might invoke a constitutional principle called the anti-commandeering doctrine.
Anti-commandeering? Sounds complex.
It stems from the 10th Amendment, which reserves powers not delegated to the federal government to the states or the people. Basically, the Supreme Court has interpreted this to mean the federal government generally cannot compel states or localities to use their own resources, their personnel, their funding to administer or enforce federal regulatory programs.
So the city might say, you can't force our police to do ICE's job.
That's often the essence of the argument, yes. Cities often argue that refusing to use their resources, like their jails or police officers, to enforce federal immigration law is a legitimate exercise of this anti-commandeering right. They're saying it's a federal responsibility, you handle it with federal resources.
Fascinating. Okay, so What does this all mean when you put the Justice Department, New York City, and sanctuary city policies together in the context of a lawsuit? What's the inherent fundamental conflict revealed by this single potent sentence?
Well, if we connect all these dots, step back and look at the bigger picture. This single sentence immediately establishes a direct fundamental clash. It's a clash between federal authority and local governance.
Federal versus local.
Right. You have the highest legal arm of the national government initiating a lawsuit against one of the nation's largest and most influential cities. And the subject matter, sanctuary city policies, indicates that the city has adopted formal rules that, at least in the eyes of the DOJ, conflict with, or at the very least differ significantly from, the federal government's enforcement priorities or its interpretation of federal power. It's really a classic example of federalism in action, or perhaps federalism in tension.
It sounds like a power struggle then at its core, but one playing out in the courtroom rather than, say, a legislative chamber or at the ballot box.
It is, yes, but specifically a legal power struggle.
Yeah.
And it's happening within the specific framework of our federal system. The very act of filing a lawsuit itself implies a fundamental disagreement over jurisdiction.
Who has the power to do what?
Exactly. Or over legal interpretation, what does the law actually mean? Or over the proper division of enforcement responsibility between these two levels of government. In a federal system like the United States, power is deliberately divided and shared between the national government and the state and local governments. This division, while it's foundational to our system, inherently creates areas of potential tension. Places where federal laws and local ordinances might seem to pull in different directions.
And the courts step in.
The courts are often the ultimate arbiters of these disputes. They're called upon to interpret the Constitution, interpret federal statutes, interpret state and local laws, and basically delineate the boundaries of power.
So the lawsuit itself isn't just about the sanctuary policies in a vacuum. It's really a symptom of this larger ongoing tension baked into our governmental structure. It's a public airing of a core disagreement on how federal and local responsibilities interact.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. This legal challenge is the concrete manifestation of that broader systemic tension between different levels of government. It signifies that the usual political channels, negotiations, intergovernmental cooperation, maybe even legislative fixes, have either failed or perhaps been bypassed entirely.
A last resort, maybe.
A lawsuit is often seen as a last resort, yes. It creates a judicial battlefield where these differing interpretations of constitutional powers, statutory mandates, and the scope of local autonomy are played out formally. The Justice Department, in filing this suit, is essentially asking the federal judiciary, the courts, to weigh in and resolve this jurisdictional conflict, to declare which level of government holds the ultimate authority in this specific area.
And this raises an important question, I think. How are these inherent tensions typically resolved within our legal framework? And maybe more critically, what does the initiation of a lawsuit like this signify about the breakdown of other forms of resolution? Why couldn't they just work it out?
Well, it tells us that the disagreement is perceived as so profound, so fundamental, that at least one party here, the DOJ, believes only a court of law can provide the necessary clarity or enforce the desired outcome. They don't think negotiation or political pressure will work anymore.
So they need a binding legal decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, the Department of Justice might argue that New York City's policies are directly obstructing the enforcement of federal immigration law, which they believe is supreme under the supremacy clause of the Constitution.
The idea that federal law is the supreme law of the land.
Correct. But New York City, in turn, might argue, as we discussed, that its policies are a legitimate exercise of its 10th Amendment rights under the anti-commandeering doctrine. They might say, you can't force us to participate in your federal program.
So you have these competing constitutional arguments.
Absolutely. And the courts will have to weigh these competing constitutional principles and statutory interpretations. This whole process can be quite lengthy, by the way.
Oh, I bet. It's not quick.
Not usually. It involves stages like filing the initial complaint, then a phase called discovery, where each side gathers evidence from the other.
Getting documents, depositions.
Exactly. Then there are motions, legal arguments presented to the judge on various points of law. Potentially, it could go to a trial, although many cases like this are decided on motions based on legal arguments rather than factual disputes needing a trial. And then, of course, there's the possibility of appeals.
Totally up.
Potentially, yes. Appeals could go up through the federal appellate courts. and maybe even reach the Supreme Court if the court decides to take the case, especially if it involves significant constitutional questions or conflicts between different circuit courts.
So the stakes are really high.
Immensely high. The outcome could set a major legal precedent affecting cities nationwide. It could invalidate significant city policies. It might even have financial implications for the city if, for example, certain federal grants are somehow tied to cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, which has been a point of contention in the past.
Right.
Ultimately, filing the lawsuit speaks to a perceived impasse, a point where judicial intervention is seen as necessary to determine the legitimate boundaries of power and policy between the federal government and local entities.
Okay. Wow. So let's bring this back to the listener. Why should you, our listener, care so much about this one sentence? We've just spent a significant amount of time breaking down a single headline. What's the real value of this kind of deep dive for you?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? I think the value is this.
Yeah.
Even with what seemed like very limited initial information, just one sentence, by meticulously understanding the parties involved.
The DOJ, NYC.
Their roles, their potential constitutional powers, their likely legal arguments. And by understanding the precise nature of the action, the specific legal meaning and implications of the word sues.
Not just disagrees with.
Right. And grasping the implied conflict, that clash between federal and local authority over these sanctuary city policies. By doing all that, we're able to gain a far deeper, more nuanced, and truly well-informed grasp of what's actually happening than if we just skimmed the headline.
It moves you beyond just knowing that it happened.
Exactly. It moves you from passive consumption of news to active, informed comprehension. You're not just hearing what happened, but hopefully understanding why it matters, the potential stakes, and how it fits into the broader legal and political landscape of the country.
It's like seeing the entire iceberg, not just the tiny tip that breaks the surface, even when all you're initially given is that one little snapshot. You start to understand the underlying structures and the powerful forces at play.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
This exercise really demonstrates how legal actions, even those stated briefly in a single sentence, are often microcosms of much larger governmental and policy debates. They encapsulate these really complex issues of federalism, jurisdiction, law enforcement, immigration, civil rights, and the responsibilities of different levels of government. Understanding the components of this one sentence empowers you, the listener, to critically evaluate not just this news item, but really any news item, by looking beyond the surface words. It equips you with a kind of toolkit to deconstruct information and discern its true significance.
It's about developing a lens, maybe. A way to see the unstated implications, the hidden tensions, the broader context that often isn't immediately apparent in a quick news hit. It allows you to become a more discerning consumer of information.
Absolutely. And maybe this raises an important question for you to consider going forward. How does this simple act, a federal department suing a major city over specific policies, how does that illustrate the ongoing dynamic of power, law, and local autonomy within a nation like the U.S.?
That constant push and pull.
It's a continuous, often contested balancing act. And every lawsuit like this represents a moment where that balance is being challenged, debated, and potentially redefined by the courts. We'd really encourage you to try applying this method of deconstruction to other headlines you encounter.
How would that work?
Just pause and look closely. Whether it's about governmental conflicts, economic shifts, social issues, ask yourself, who are the actors? What precise action are they taking? Is it suing, regulating, legislating, protesting? What's the core subject matter? Look beyond the initial phrasing to grasp the inherent implications. By dissecting the language, you can often uncover layers of meaning and understand the underlying dynamics at play. It can turn a brief snippet of news into a much richer source of understanding.
So what we've really seen today is that even a single, seemingly simple news item, Justice Department sues New York City over sanctuary city policies, holds layers upon layers of profound meaning when you take the time to carefully examine it. We've gone from just a headline to hopefully a much more detailed understanding of a significant governmental, legal, and constitutional clash and the potential strategic implications behind it.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here, I think, is that every legal action, regardless of how it's presented in a headline, really represents a unique attempt to resolve some kind of fundamental disagreement, a disagreement about power or rights or responsibilities.
A formal way to settle a fight.
A formal, structured way, exactly. This lawsuit is just one compelling example of that ongoing process playing out in the public sphere. It's a direct challenge by the federal government to the city's policies, forcing a judicial reckoning on who's right under the law. And maybe a final thought to ponder is, What other headlines might reveal if you apply a similar lens? If you focus on the actors, the precise action, and the subject matter, what deeper forces at work might you uncover? The world of information is just full of these hidden layers waiting to be discovered.
And with that, this deep dive concludes. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep digging deeper into the information around you. You'll be
Mind News. If you found this report helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We bring you the facts, insights, and updates that matter, straight from the source. See you in the next report.